Morning, everybody. My name is Stephen Cheeseborough. I'm the city attorney here, in case anybody isn't aware. We're here to talk about preventing workplace harassment. We're trying to do this in person for most people, to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions or to make sure that we're communicating everything appropriately to everybody. If there are any questions, feel free to raise your hand or ask, let me know, and then we'll address those questions as we go through. Kind of give you guys an idea of what to expect today. We're going to have a little brief opener. We're going to go through defining harassment, identifying harassment, what options you have if you're being harassed, how to report harassment, what the harassment investigation looks like, penalties for violation of the harassment code, and then a code of conduct that the city has. So quite a bit to get through here today. To start off with, we're going to go ahead and discuss characteristics of a good work environment.
Okay, so this is an all-skate. Everybody has to play. What we're going to do is not everybody has been their entire career at Watertown. Maybe you have. All right, so you've worked at other places, though, where you know that there are things like you're really appreciated about doing that work. Oh. Ooh, this is official. Okay. So, everybody has worked someplace before. Everybody's worked at least one other place before, whether it's a quickie mart or whether it's babysitting or mowing grass, whatever it would be. So what I want to know is, what have you appreciated in past working places? So shout it out. Okay, like 15, 20 things up here. What do you like about places where you've worked in the past?
Effective communication.
Communication.
Friendliness.
Friendliness. You know why I'm not going to spell correctly? Just so y'all know that we're all human. Because that's why I don't spell correctly. Just for you. Just for you. Okay.
How about willingness to help? Flexibility.
Anything on that side?
Be your own boss.
Be your own boss.
How about approachability?
Approachable.
Respect.
You want me to read off some from other camaraderie, benefits, pay? Y'all didn't say nothing about pay yet. Am I adding it? Is that a unanimous vote? Pay? Okay. Surprised it wasn't first. Expectations, job duties, the location, your teamwork, communication, being treated like a human, accomplishment, respect, growth, trust, truthfulness, environment, conditions, leadership, trust, respect, accountability, appreciation, honesty, transparency, communication, knowing the expectations, what's expected, knowing the standards, knowing your expectations, good communication, above average pay, cooperative, morale, respect, crew bonding, leadership, atmosphere, benefits, retirement, pension, workload, trust, accountability, communication, people, organization, schedule, happy customers, treat like a human, respect, appreciation. I have a couple more. Any of those that we want to add that aren't there? Are you okay with this list?
Appreciation.
Appreciation. You want to add one more?
Value.
Value? Feeling valued? All right, so we have a list of good things. What do we want to list for the bad things?
Poor pay.
Poor pay.
Micromanagement.
Leaders that don't listen.
Poor leaders. Lack of communication. Favoritism.
Favoritism. No one listens to you, lack of communication, negative,
Not valued.
not valued.
Rigid.
That's all right. Negative people, being marginalized, poor leadership, double standard, gatekeeping, like keeping secrets, failure to ask for input, not having the tools you need, bad pay, bad leadership. Does anybody know what gaslighting is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it's a word that is a buzzword, but tell me what you think it is, because I'm not very good at explaining what it is.
So to me, gaslighting is trying to convince someone that what they think is right is wrong. So, you know, if I'm talking to someone and I'm like, oh yeah, you know, this sports team won, you know, the championship last year. They're like, no, it didn't. I'm like, yeah, I could have sworn they did. And they're like, no, it wasn't. It was so-and-so. And you're like, okay, and they convince you that you're wrong, and then only to find out that, yeah, it was right after all.
Yeah, yeah. Making you feel like you're crazy is the basic definition I get from most people. So gaslighting, it's a new word. I don't know if you want to add it, but making you feel like you're crazy. Your bad workload, bad working conditions, micromanagement, both internal and external. Again, gatekeeping or holding secrets, lack of support, marginalized. There's lots more bads, I think, out there. Anything else that we think that we like added to this bad list so we can see it? Is this okay? You want anything else added up here? So what we're gonna do now, I know that I've done behaviors in this bad column. What I'm hoping is that people would be able to speak to me and bring it up to me, and I hope that relationship has been there, because we all would like to have this type of an environment, a good working environment, where you can be approachable. So as Stephen talks a little bit more about, you know, the harassment in the work environment, the idea is that, you know, he's also going to talk about the code of conduct at the end and how to build that, so that we can have an environment more like this and try to mitigate some of these behaviors on this side. So for if you haven't been aware of what our policies are, he's going to go through that and how you're going to report some of those behaviors so we can try to all work together toward this here. So, oh, passing the power.
So since we're talking about the city's harassment policy, I thought the first thing that we should talk about is what that actual policy is. So I'm going to read it to you because it is important that we all know what it is. It's the policy of the city that all employees have a right to work in an environment where they are treated with respect and dignity and are free from all forms of harassment. The city will not tolerate, condone, or allow harassment by any employee or non-employee who conducts business with the city. Harassment violates the City of Watertown policies and can result in legal consequences for individuals. Now, it's important that everybody understands that harassing somebody can result in legal consequences and everything like that, but what's also important is it's not the standard for the city. The city standard is to prohibit all forms of harassment. We want everybody to be free from any kind of harassment. So it doesn't have to reach the legal definition of harassment for it to be a violation of the city's policy. It just has to be harassment. So that begs the question of, well, what is harassment? Who here can tell me what they believe harassment is? You guys have all lived lives, everybody here has an opinion as to what's harassing
Yeah,
conduct.
there's no wrong answer.
I'm just asking.
Making somebody feel not comfortable.
Okay. So making somebody feel not comfortable, that's
belittled.
definitely part of harassment. Any other brave people to volunteer?
We went through a phase of harassment where it was only definition in one of the workplaces I worked at. It was only harassment if it was unwanted.
Okay, unwanted, that's a good place to start. So I boiled it down to two things. It's conduct which is unwelcome or unwanted, and intimidates, degrades, is hostile or abusive. Those are the two requirements for something to become harassment and can result in a violation of the policy. So what's unwelcome conduct? Who can tell me what unwelcome conduct is to them?
I think that probably has, to use the term 50 shades of gray, there's probably 50 shades of unwelcome conduct.
Probably a few more than that.
Yeah, at least that.
There's not a single definition here. There's not one definition that you can provide somebody that will define any and all unwelcome conduct. Other than that, it's unwelcome. Actions or statements that are acceptable by some can be viewed as unwelcome by others or offensive by others. A person's viewpoint can change given time or even depending on who they're speaking to. What you expect is acceptable conduct from your best friend from elementary school is very different than what I would suspect you would expect conduct or appropriate conduct to be from somebody else in this room, somebody in the workplace, coworkers, friends, family, other people. That changes, and that's part of what makes this a difficult topic to figure out. Conduct can be unacceptable even if you don't mean to offend somebody. It's not about your internal desire of how you're speaking or how you're acting as to whether or not it's unwelcome conduct. It's dependent on the people that you're interacting with, how they interpret the response and the comments, and whether they believe it to be offensive or not. The behavior doesn't need to be illegal, again, to be considered harassment or inappropriate and violate the city's harassment policy. We're not looking at the legal definition here for harassment in terms of conduct by employees and stuff to that effect. So what does intimidate, degrade, hostile, or abusive mean? This is a long list, but it's comments, actions, or inactions which have a frightening or threatening effect regardless of intent again. It's treating or regarding somebody with contempt, disrespecting somebody, unfriendly or antagonistic, exhibits habitual violence and cruelty, or involves repetitive, unwelcome conduct, especially after having been asked to stop. So one important part of this also is that the conduct can be comments, actions, or inaction. It's not enough to just ignore somebody and say, well, if I just ignore them and not interact with them at all, I can't harass them. That's not true. Segregating somebody out, ignoring them can result in harassment. So, identifying harassment. If somebody's asked for the conduct to stop or a topic to not be discussed, you should be well aware that you're in an area where you're likely going to result in harassment in somebody. Once somebody's asked for it to stop or to not be discussed, just stop. If you do that, you're likely not going to result in any violations of the harassment policy. You don't have to worry about it. The comment is in regards to or directed at a protected class. Protected class is defined as race, ethnicity, age, gender, sexual orientation, marital status, arrest, conviction record, religion, national origin, or disability. It's a very long list. I don't expect anybody here to memorize that list. I don't like memorizing the list. I look it up when I need to. The important thing here is if you're basing it off of a characteristic of an individual, it's likely going to be viewed as a classification. If you're not basing it off of a characteristic of an individual, you don't have to worry about whether or not it's a protected class or not. It's not a classification. So try to just avoid basing comments on various characteristics of individuals. Offensive remarks, jokes, actions, or materials can result in harassing violations. We'll discuss offensive remarks a little bit more later. Jokes about people's parents or significant others. For some reason, people find them funny when they're telling the jokes. Nobody who's receiving the jokes have ever found them funny. So it just seems like a topic that you would want to avoid. If you're making jokes about those things, it's going to result in problems. Comments about other people's political positions. Now, this isn't saying that you can't discuss politics. You're all adults. You all have a First Amendment right of free speech. You can discuss what you want to discuss. However, there's names that both sides of the political spectrum call each other to try and be derogatory or inflame them to get them to get more upset. Those types of comments are unacceptable. You don't need to be accusing people of anything. You can have a professional, adult, responsible conversation with people without having to go down the role of calling people names or anything like that. Saying or implying somebody is stupid, demeaning their position or their role. Again, this is something where you're demeaning somebody, trying to make them feel less than what they are. Everybody has value, and so it doesn't help to do that. Repeated pressure, asking somebody to go to a bar multiple times can become harassment. It's just about whether you're continuing to ask things. It's not wrong to ask them. You can, in good faith, ask somebody to go do something with you. But if they say no, or not right now, or anything like that, leave it on them. Tell them the offer is always open. They can come and talk to you whenever you want. You guys will schedule something. The problem becomes when you're continuing telling them, no, let's go out tonight, let's do this tonight, let's do this, come on, let's go. You know, starting to say things to them. That's where the problem becomes harassment. So, exclusive behavior, that again is where you just decide, well, I'm gonna solve this problem of possibly speaking inappropriately by just not talking to the person. That doesn't work. That's still excluding them, that's still causing a problem, and that's still conduct which is trying to demean that person.
So every single one of these has happened in the last 3 months. So every single one of these has been on Steven's desk in the last 3 months. And I can tell you, like, the exclusive behavior. Oh, I just won't talk to them anymore then. I'm just gonna not even talk to them. Heard that one many a times this summer. Repeated pressure.
I did.
Yeah, it's like, I'm just not gonna talk to them anymore. Oh, they're just gonna have to figure it out themselves. The repeated pressure one, I'm just so worried about your soul. I'm just so worried about your soul. You should just come to church with me. I'm so worried about your soul. Heard that one a million times from my mother-in-law. Saying or implying someone's stupid. Well, don't you know anything? Didn't they teach you how to do that? Every single one of these, and like, oh, offensive remarks. You know, my kids, we were talking about the offensive remarks one. Like, if you were to look at any movies 20 years ago, like, my kids will even say, Mom, he should stop asking her out. That's offensive. I'm like, well, that was like in the 90s. It's totally fine. In the 90s, you know, Die Hard, totally fine. In the 80s, you know, it changes with the times as well. And for real, every single department has had issues like this. And like Stephen had mentioned, is if the other person finds that it's uncomfortable, or he'll tell you about this other, then it becomes an issue.
So is this workplace specific? I mean, there we go, okay.
Right there. Actually, it did come up in the article.
So where does it cover?
Yeah.
That's the next
That's
question.
Questions, yeah,
Yep.
here we go.
So there isn't really an area where it doesn't cover. This isn't something where it's simply while you're on a clock here in the office or in the building. It's almost any area, even after hour events, can cover and be covered by the city's harassment policy. Anytime employees are gathered, the city policies apply.
So the city owns us.
It's private sector as well.
Not what we're saying.
It's not just public sector, private sector has a similar.
First impression is like, no, you will do what I say at all times.
We'll get there. Anytime you identify yourself or are recognized as a city employee and your actions can reflect on the city's policy applies. Harassment can also occur at any time in virtual forms like internet sites, email logs, electronic communications, including text messaging, and social networking sites. For example, WhatsApp, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, Teams, and Twitter. X, I think, should also be added on there at this point, but there's hundreds of different sites that get created every month. So I'm not.
So I don't see like someone saying like, oh, I can't wait until 5 o'clock so I can call you a moron, you know, what's not like that, like, you wouldn't call someone a moron anyhow, I hope not, but.
So this isn't saying that the city controls you or owns you or anything else to that effect. It's saying that, yes, your actions, if they reflect poorly on the city, can result in a violation of the city's harassment policy. If you're harassing an employee of the city outside of the work environment, it's not some magical time clock where all of a sudden you can harass people just because you're outside of your standard work hours. The expectation is that we will all treat each other with respect at all times. What you say off the clock when you're on your own time, in your own private environment, and you made very clear has nothing to do with your position at the city, that's on you. You guys have First Amendment rights, you guys can say what you want to say as individuals, but you need to make sure that you're being clear that this is your personal opinion or your personal position and not reflected in your role as a city employee, or that it doesn't reflect on what the city's position is. That's where the issue becomes potentially. So we'll get to what happens if the harassment policy is violated later on. I don't want to jump ahead too much there, but offensive materials is the next section. Materials are considered offensive if they are sexually explicit, contain crude, defamatory, or hateful content regarding someone's race, ethnicity, religion, gender, or any other protected characteristic. Offensive materials can be distributed in many forms, such as posters, photographs, memes, GIFs, whiteboards, cartoons, screensavers, apps, graffiti, internet sites like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, as well as all the elements that we just talked about. So, for the most part, offensive materials, everybody understands what those are. People used to think it was perfectly fine to have pinups in their office or anything else like that. It's not acceptable in 2023. Hasn't been for a few years, I would think, but it's still stuff that there's an appropriate place and time for that, and at work isn't one of them. So if we receive complaints about them, they'll be addressed. It's better to just leave any offensive materials at home or on your own time. Repeated pressure, again, a hostile work environment can be created by repeatedly pressuring a coworker to do something that is not a part of their job. Key portion of that sentence is that it's not a part of their job. It's not harassment to remind somebody that they need to do something that is part of their job. You can tell people that they've got to follow through with what they're supposed to be doing. Repeatedly asking somebody to go to a social interaction outside of work can create the hostile work environment. These situations require extreme caution. A lot of times the response that we get is, I was just trying to be friendly, I was just trying to help them out, introduce them to the city, do this. Your intention isn't good enough as a defense. It's not going to stop you from being in violation of the harassment policy. It's the starting point for whether it's unwelcome or not is whether it's offensive to the person that was receiving the comments. Again, asking them once isn't going to be a problem. You know, once isn't repeated pressure. Asking them once and giving them an open-ended offer of, hey, anytime you want to do it, let me know and we'll schedule something in the future, that's fine. It's when you sit there and say, you know, this Friday night we're going out, this Friday night we're going out, this Friday night, or asking them every week, you know, hey, what about this weekend, what about this weekend? If they've said no once, accept that no, give them the open invitation if you need to. Beyond that, it's where it starts to become harassment, so. Options if you're being harassed. The very first option is you can always tell the harasser to stop. Tell them you don't like it, tell them it's not funny, don't do that, any of those kinds of things. I would say the vast majority of people are fairly reasonable and responsible. We're all adults, we're all professionals. There's not a reason that asking somebody to stop what you consider harassing conduct wouldn't immediately result in them stopping that conduct. Especially not after they've sat through the harassment training or anything like that. So that one resolves most of these situations and is the quickest resolution for most of these situations. If they don't stop, if for some reason you're not comfortable asking the person to stop, the next step is to report the harassment to either your supervisor or the harasser's supervisor. Sometimes people don't feel comfortable reporting it because it is a supervisor or anything like that. Go to their supervisor, go to another supervisor. There's always somebody that you can report it to. They will look into your situation, they will report back within 10 days that they've addressed the situation or that they're not taking any further actions, and that's the only response you're gonna receive from the supervisor. If that doesn't resolve the problem, report it to the department head. If the harassment's continuing, if the supervisor hasn't responded within the 10 business days, or any other problems, go straight to the department head. If that doesn't work and resolve it, then Human Resources Department's the next stop. File it with Lisa, let her know about what's going on. She has a little bit more than 10 days to respond to that, but we'll get to that stuff later. It's important that you guys report these things. The other important thing is that you document each step that's taken and any responses that you received. So that allows us to make sure that we know what's happened going up to that point. It allows us to not have to repeat steps or processes and to know how serious of a violation this is. There's a huge difference between somebody who you've never talked to, who's doing something that you find offensive, and they have no idea about it whatsoever, and somebody who you've told you think something is offensive, the supervisor's told them it's offensive, the department head's told them that it's offensive and needs to stop, and they're just now still continuing it. Like, that becomes an issue that's much more substantial and can be addressed a lot quicker than other things.
So a couple of things about this slide. Okay. So people, as we've been going through these trainings, people don't realize how much power they really do have. A lot of people feel like, oh, I can't say that. Like, there is so much power in that first step. Did you tell so-and-so? Oh, no, I couldn't do that. Okay, well, if so-and-so is calling, like my name is James, and so-and-so, oh, hey, Jimmy, and I say, don't call me Jimmy. Boom, shut down, right there. 90% of the situations can be resolved if you tell them, hey, don't do that. If you're not going to say anything and you let it drag on, you're not utilizing your power. You have a lot of power when you tell that person, no, don't do that, thank you, move along. The other reason why it's important to do that first step is because, again, your supervisor has 10 days, and if you did nothing that first time, and you're like, oh, well, yeah, that happened 3-4 weeks ago, like, they've got 10 days to do something about it, to make your life a little better, rather than waiting 3 weeks and you're like nervous to come into work every day. So take that first step, say something to that person, and then if it still doesn't resolve it, talk to the supervisor, because by the time they come into my office, every time someone comes into my office, they're like, well, nothing's happened. And then I say, well, your supervisor's responsibility is to the safety of the department, okay? They are the ones making sure you all go home safe at the end of the day. So if they don't know that you're having this issue, and now by the time you come to me, you're really stressed out about it, you're gonna be like, oh, now I have to wait another 10 days. So tell the person first. If something doesn't get resolved, go to the supervisor, and then your result is gonna get done quicker. The other thing most people have an issue with is the documentation. But if you have a calendar, you write down, it was called Jimmy today, boom, you save it. You know, like, up 3 days later, call Jimmy again, boom. By the third time it happens and you go to your supervisor, you're like, it's happened 3 times. Like, that's all it takes is to note it. And you don't have to write a full page dysentery about whatever it has. But people don't utilize that power either, to like write down when the thing happened. Doesn't have to be huge.
So let's say you're not the one that's actually being harassed, but you see somebody else that is being harassed. You have a couple different options. Once you identify the harassment, you can disrupt it and request that it stop. Just address it bluntly and say, hey, knock it off, that's not acceptable conduct here. You can redirect the individuals away from the situation, have them get back to what they're supposed to be working on, whatever task they're doing or anything like that. Or you can intercede and then check on the individual that's being subjected to harassment. So interfere, get the person to go away that's causing the harassment, talk to the other person, say, hey, I'm sorry, I don't know what that was about, you shouldn't have to deal with that, are you okay? Check in with them and see what's going on there. Once that's done and the harassment's taken care of and it's not happening anymore, the next thing you need to do is report that harassment to your the harasser supervisor within 48 hours. It's in the employee handbook. The city's policy and expectation is that if you observe somebody harassing somebody else, you will report it to your supervisor within 48 hours. If the supervisor doesn't take any action or doesn't meet what you're expecting them to do, you can follow up with the department head. If the department head doesn't do anything, you can follow up with the human resources department. Document when each step is taken and any responses you received. So this is the same thing again, just gotta follow up and document those things so we know what steps have been taken and what responses have been received to that point.
So there too, standing up for your buddy, when you see someone that is going through this, like, it's so impressive to your team. Like, this person is in this situation and you see it and they see that you're standing up for them. Like, it is so, it's a very good team building opportunity there to show them that you've got each other's back and you're not just gonna let the harassment continue for your friend.
So once you've reported harassment, you're gonna be asking questions. The supervisor, department head, HR, everybody's gonna ask what happened, when it happened, who was present, what attempts you've taken to try and address that harassment, because we need to know what occurred, who was there, what potential witnesses there are. From there, the supervisor will have 10 days to report that they've investigated and addressed the complaint or are unable to take any additional actions on the complaint. They will ask that you follow up if the harassment continues. That's the only other information you're going to get about the complaint. They're not going to report every step they take or what disciplinary action, if any, is taken. That's not the part of the harassment policy. We're not supposed to be reporting things to you guys as to what's happened or anything like that. It's simply a matter that the investigation has been completed, it's been addressed, or they're not able to take any additional action. The expected outcome from any harassment reporting is that the harassment stops. That's it. That's the expectation. That's the city's policy, that there's not going to be harassment. If it doesn't stop, follow up with the supervisor or escalate to the next level of reporting, and eventually it will stop.
Everybody thinks that if they come into HR and they report this, that everybody's gonna get fired. And while I would love to fire everybody, it's a really bad hiring market right now. So it's not just that it stops, the harassment stops, and we can all work in this good work environment.
So what we've been talking about so far is harassment internally by other employees or people within the city. Unfortunately, sometimes harassment comes from the public. This is a little bit different standard. Occasionally, frequently, depends on the what constitutes harassment from the public does require the legal definition of harassment to apply, and is actually a heightened standard due to our public nature of our positions. So the standard for that has to be shown is that there was no legitimate purpose besides the intent to harass. If the public has a legitimate purpose, we have to work with them, we have to talk to them, and they can follow up or ask questions or anything like that. Beyond that, if there's no legitimate purpose but besides harassing, that's when the city can get involved and start taking actions. The city's involved if the harassment occurs during work time or as a result of your being a city employee. Unfortunately, somebody in this room will be harassed outside of work at some point in their lives. The city can't do anything to help you with that unless it's affecting you at work, at which point we're only going to minimize or stop the harassment at work. We can't do anything to help you in your own personal aspects. You got to address that yourselves. You can ask the public to stop harassing conducts. You can tell the public that you will not tolerate being harassed. You can request somebody else assist the individual if they are specifically targeting you. Now, the reason that it says that they're specifically targeting you is because sometimes people are just upset with the city in general, and they're just yelling or harassing the city in general. Transferring to somebody else at your level or in your position isn't going to solve that problem or stop the harassing conduct. So at that point, we would ask that you either just end the conversation with them, address it one of these other ways, or escalate it to a supervisor. You can hang up, walk away, or ignore the harasser. The other one that I've added on here is you can also contact the police department and report them for disorderly conduct. You can't tell the police department to do anything or issue any citations. The officers have the individual capacity to make those determinations themselves. They won't listen to you if you tell them they have to issue a citation. They'll make their own independent determination. They won't listen to me if I tell them they have to issue a citation. They have to make that determination themselves. But they will work with you to de-escalate the situation and get the harassment to stop if you're not able to use one of the other options. If you do any of those 4 things, report it to the police department, ignore them, hang up on them, or walk away, report that incident to your supervisor as soon as you're able to. It's not necessarily a mandatory requirement, but I can assure you the public will be reporting it to your supervisor, and it's a lot easier for the city and your supervisor if we know the complaint's coming. If we don't know anything about it and we get a complaint, we have to act as if we fully trust them and that they're telling us everything that's true and that whatever they say is accurate. If we already know the story from you, we can start to question things and get more information from them that can help us make a determination. If the harassment continues, report it to your supervisor and your department head. As always, document each occasion of harassment, what steps you have taken to report or stop the harassment, and any responses you have received. I can assure you, harassment from the public will become far more uncomfortable for you than you want it to before we can step in and take much legal action. Unfortunately, that's the nature of being in public service and people having the right to say what they want to say. There are restrictions on it. Your best defense is to either tell them to stop talking to you that way, that you won't tolerate harassing conduct, and to hang up, walk away, or ignore them. So the complaint procedure, there's 2 different complaint procedures within the city under the policy, an informal and a formal procedure. The informal complaint procedure, you meet with your supervisor, discuss the issue. Preliminary investigation shall be conducted. Investigations are given top priority, and all complaints are treated seriously and confidentially. That's why you're not being told about every step that goes along with the investigation. That's why you're not given a lot of updates or anything like that. The supervisor will take the complaint, they'll address it, and then they'll move on. Whenever possible, the investigating authority will attempt to resolve the issue within 10 working days after the initial interview with the complainant, and they shall keep a detailed record of the investigatory activities. If the issue is not resolved satisfactorily to the satisfaction of the complainant, they can proceed to the formal complaint procedure, escalate it to a department head, or eventually to HR. It just kind of depends on what you want to do. The main change that is going to happen with the city right now in terms of this informal process is that supervisors are going to accept any time somebody comes to them and talks to them about an issue as them initiating the informal complaint procedure. If you're reporting to your supervisor that somebody did something that upsets you, they're going to take that as the informal complaint. I've heard a few times where somebody comes and they vent to a supervisor and say, so-and-so did this, and this, and it's really bothering me and stuff like that. And the supervisor says, okay, well, do you want to make an informal complaint about that? And they're like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not complaining, I'm not saying they did anything wrong, I'm just venting because I'm upset about this. If you're that upset that you're going to a supervisor and telling them about something, you're filing a complaint. You're telling them what's going on. So supervisors will take that initial contact from you as a request that you do the investigation. Supervisors will look into the matter and address the situation as appropriate. If the initial complaint comes from somebody who witnessed the harassment, the supervisor will then go to the person that's alleged to have been harassed. They will talk to that individual and see if the situation occurred the way that it was reported, if they have any concerns or problems with how it happened, and if they want to move forward with the informal complaint procedure at that point in time. If the individual that was alleged to be harassed says that they don't want to go forward with a complaint or that they didn't view it as harassing conduct and it wasn't unwanted or unwelcome, then at that point the supervisor will report back to the person that complains that no further action is going to be taken on the matter.
So this isn't just for the employee, like, oh, no, I don't want to file it. I mean, this is for the supervisor too. We're tired of the, oh, that's just Betty over there. It's like, no, supervisor. If somebody is bringing this to you, it's important to them. You need to at least show that you've gone through the steps to address it. You can't just sweep it under the rug anymore. And Emily is totally on board with that as well. And we go into the leadership team meetings and we say, you're responsible to make sure that if somebody comes up to you, you follow the 10 working days and you address the situation. no more sweeping things under the rug, and oh, that's just so-and-so, or that's just the way we do it here, no more.
The formal complaint procedure requires a written complaint using the authorized form being submitted to Human Resources Department. The written form is available on the city's website under the Employee Resources tab. If you have any trouble finding it or would like to see a copy of it, let me know and I can get that for you. All you gotta do is fill out the form. It asks a bunch of questions as far as what happened, when it happened, who was involved, who was present. Fill that out, provide it to Human Resources. Human Resources initiates a formal investigation, forwards a complaint to myself. I review it and initiate an investigation within 3 working days from receiving the formal complaint. And then I investigate it and will complete a fact-finding report upon completion of the investigation, and the report's to be completed as soon as practical. I don't necessarily have the 10 working days to get the report completed, but it is something that gets given high priority in my office, so we will address it as soon as we can. But again, at the end of the day, from the formal complaint procedure, you're gonna get the same response, that it's been addressed and it should be resolved, or that there's no action that can be taken. So, disciplinary action. If there's been a complaint about harassment, and if it's been determined that there's been harassing conduct, what happens from there? There's a couple different options. There can be counseling, there can be verbal warning, written warning, suspension, demotion, or separation. This isn't a progression chart. It's not a matter of you get 7 chances to harass people before you have to worry about getting separated. This isn't something that is saying you're going to get these only one time. It can be that you get them multiple times. It can be that somebody gets a couple written warnings or verbal warnings. It can be that somebody's separated on the very first offense. It all depends on the severity of the harassment offense, and it depends on how often it's been occurring, what's occurred, how much you've addressed it once you've been talked to about it. There's a lot of different factors that go into this to determine what an appropriate disciplinary action is going to be from any given situation. Failing to report harassment or helping to cover up harassment can result in disciplinary actions equal to or exceeding the offender. So this one shocks most people, and I'm trying to make sure everybody understands my position on this as clearly as I can make it. If you're covering up somebody else's harassing conduct, you're just as guilty as they are. You're just as responsible for the conduct and the environments, and in fact, you're potentially worse. If somebody's calling somebody else a name and they're harassing them by calling them a name that the person doesn't like, they're wrong. They should be told to stop. They should learn that they need to stop. And they're probably gonna get a verbal warning. But if you're involved in that situation and you hear them being called that name, or you see the person getting called a name, and you then lie to us while we're investigating the matter as to whether or not somebody's calling somebody else a name, you're committing fraud to the city. You're falsely reporting information. And that's, to me, a bigger concern as to whether or not we can trust you in doing other things for the city. So, fair warning now for everybody here. Failing to report or reporting or covering up incidents of harassment is likely to be just as severely disciplined or potentially even worse. Code of conduct is a set of values, rules, standards, and principles outlining what is expected from individuals within an organization. The code of conduct is included in the employee handbook under section 7, personal conduct. In conclusion, act as a professional. Treat others with dignity and respect. No one should be subject to harassment. Request that harassment stops if there occurs. Report it. It's a fairly simple matter. I mean, we're all adults here. Everybody should be able to be treated with respect. I don't see what any concerns are. So if there are problems or anything like that, let us know. Does anybody have any questions or concerns or thoughts? Well, thank you all for your time. Appreciate you coming down and listening.